大家好，又係讀你聽2.0嘅時間。今日繼續讀 A.Christie 嘅 Sparkling Cyanide 去到 Book 3嘅 Chapter 11啊。咁上一次咧就睇到阿 Race 咧就同 Anthony Brown 落口供啦，亦都知道佢嘅真正身份係 Tony Morelli 啦。Anthony Brown 亦都承認咗佢嘅身份，亦都隱晦咁樣講咗佢嘅身份咧唔係淨係一個囚犯簡單嘅，似乎係有一個政治目的嘅咁樣。咁啊佢係嚟查案㗎喎，佢都係咁啊大有來頭嘅。而 Anthony 亦都透露咗咧，佢懷疑嘅咧係 Ruth Lessing。咁啊，最後咧亦都俾咗 Race 個忠告啦，就係寫信提醒 George Barton 嘅人，佢知道咁多嘢咧，好容易會被滅口嘅。好啦，我哋呢一節繼續讀啦。From information received over the telephone, Anthony knew that Lucilla Drake was going out at 5 o'clock to drink a cup of tea with a dear old friend. Allowing for possible contingencies, Anthony timed his own arrival at Alverton Square at precisely 25 minutes past 5. It was Iris he wanted to see, not her aunt. And by all accounts, once shown into Lucilla's presence, he would have had very little chance of uninterrupted conversation with his lady. He was told by the parlourmaid that Miss Iris had just come in and was in the study. Anthony said with a smile, "Don't bother, I'll find my way," and went past her and along to the study door. Iris spun round at his entrance with a nervous start. "Oh, it's you!" He came over to her swiftly. "What's the matter, darling?" "Nothing," she paused, then said quickly, "Nothing, only I was nearly run over. Oh, my own fault. I expect I was thinking so hard and mooning across the road without looking, and the car came tearing round the corner and just missed me." He gave her a gentle little shake. "You mustn't do that sort of thing, Iris. I'm worried about you." "Oh, not about your miraculous escape from under the wheels of the car, but about the reason that lets you moon about in the midst of traffic. What is it, darling? There's something special, isn't there?" She nodded. Her eyes, raised mournfully to his, were large and dark with fear. He recognized the message even before she said very low and quick, "I'm afraid." Anthony recovered his calm, smiling poise. He sat down beside Iris on a wide settee. "Come on," he said, "let's have it." "I don't think I want to tell you, Anthony." "Now then, funny. Don't be like the heroines of third-rate thrillers who start in the very first chapter by having something they can't possibly tell for no real reason except to gum up the hero and make the book spin itself out for another 50,000 words." She gave a faint, pale smile. "I want to tell you, Anthony, but I don't know what you think. I don't know if you believe." Anthony raised a hand and began to check off the fingers. 1, an illegitimate baby. 2, a blackmailing lover. 3, she interrupted him indignantly. "Of course not. Nothing of that kind." "You relieve my mind," said Anthony. "Come on, little idiot." Iris's face clouded over again. "It's nothing to laugh at. It's about the other night." "Yes?" His voice sharpened. Iris said, "You were at the inquest this morning. You heard." She paused. "Very little," said Anthony. "The police surgeon being technical about cyanides generally and the effect of potassium cyanide on George, and the police evidence as given by that first inspector, Notkamp, the one with the smart moustache who arrived first at Luxembourg and took charge. Identification of the body by George's chief clerk. The inquest was then adjourned for a week by a properly docile coroner." "It's the inspector, I mean," said Iris. "He described finding a small paper packet under the table containing traces of potassium cyanide." Anthony looked interested. "Yes, obviously whoever slipped that stuff into George's glass just dropped the paper that had contained it under the table. Simplest thing to do. Couldn't risk having it found on him or her." To his surprise, Iris began to tremble violently. "Oh no, Anthony, oh no, it wasn't like that." "What do you mean, darling? What do you know about it?" Iris said, "I dropped that packet under the table." He turned astonished eyes upon her. "Listen, Anthony, you remember how George drank off that champagne and then it happened?" He nodded. "It was awful, like a bad dream, coming just when everything had seemed to be all right. I mean that after the cabaret, when the lights went up, I felt so relieved, because it was then, you know, that we found Rosemary dead, and somehow, I don't know why, I felt I'd see it all happen again. I felt she was there, dead, at the table." "Darling." "Oh, I know, it was just nerves. But anyway, there we were, and there was nothing awful, and suddenly it seemed the whole thing was really done with at last, and one could, I don't know how to explain it, begin again. And so I danced with George and really felt I was enjoying myself at last, and we came back to the table. And then George suddenly talked about Rosemary and asked us to drink to her memory, and then he died and all the nightmare had come back. I just felt paralyzed, I think. I stood there, shaking. You came round to look at him, and I moved back a little, and the waiters came and someone asked for a doctor, and all the time I was standing there frozen. Then suddenly a big lump came in my throat, and tears began to run down my cheeks, and I jerked open my bag to get my handkerchief. I just fumbled in it, not seeing properly, and got out my handkerchief, but there was something caught up inside the handkerchief. A folded stiff bit of white paper, like the kind you get powders in from the chemist. Only, you see, Anthony, it hadn't been in my bag when I started from home. I hadn't had anything like that. I put the things in myself when the bag was quite empty. A powder compact, lipstick, my handkerchief, my evening comb in its case, and a shilling and a couple of sixpences. Somebody had put that packet in my bag. They must have done. And I remembered how they found a packet like that in Rosemary's bag after she died, and how it had cyanide in it. I was frightened, Anthony. I was horribly frightened. My fingers went limp and the packet fluttered down from my handkerchief under the table. I let it go, and I didn't say anything. I was too frightened. Somebody meant it to look as though I had killed George, and I didn't. Anthony gave vent to a long and prolonged whistle. And nobody saw you, he said. Iris hesitated. I'm not sure, she said slowly. I believe Ruth noticed, but she was looking so dazed that I don't know whether she really noticed, or if she was just staring at me blankly. Anthony gave another whistle. This, he remarked, is a pretty kettle of fish. Iris said, It's got worse and worse. I've been so afraid they'd find out. Why weren't your fingerprints on it, I wonder? The first thing they'd do would be to fingerprint it. I suppose it was because I was holding it through the handkerchief? Anthony nodded. Yes, you had luck there. But who could have put it in my bag? I had my bag with me all the evening. That's not so impossible as you think. When you went to dance after the cabaret, you left your bag in a table. Somebody may have tampered with it then. And there are the women. Could you get up and give me an imitation of just how a woman behaves at the ladies' cloakroom? It's the sort of thing I wouldn't know. Do you congregate and chat, or do you drift off to different mirrors? Iris considered. We all went to the same table, a great long glass-topped one, and we put our bags down and looked at our faces, you know. Actually, I don't. Go on. Ruth powdered her nose, and Sandra patted her hair and pushed the hairpin in, and I took off my fox cape and gave it to the woman, and then I saw I'd got some dirt on my hand, a smear of mud, and I went over to the wash basins, leaving your bag on the glass table. Yes, and I washed my hands. Ruth was still fixing her face, I think, and Sandra went and gave up her cloak, and then she went back to the glass, and Ruth came and washed her hands, and I went back to the table and just fixed my hair a little. So either of those two could have put something in your bag without your seeing. Yes, but I can't believe either Ruth or Sandra would do such a thing. You think too highly of people. Sandra is the kind of gothic creature who would have burned her enemies at the stake in the Middle Ages, and Ruth would make the most devastatingly practical poisoner that ever stepped this earth. If it was Ruth, why didn't she say she saw me drop it? You have me there. If Ruth deliberately planted cyanide on you, she'd take jolly good care you didn't get rid of it. So it looks as though it wasn't Ruth. In fact, the waiter is far and away the best bet. The waiter! If only we had a strange waiter, a peculiar waiter, a waiter hired for that evening only. But instead we have Giuseppe and Pierre, and they just don't fit. Iris sighed. I'm glad I've told you. No one will ever know now, will they? Only you and I? Anthony looked at her with a rather embarrassed expression. It's not going to be just like that, Iris. In fact, you're coming with me now in a taxi to Old Man Camp. We can't keep this under our hats. Oh no, Anthony, they'll think I killed George. They'll certainly think so if they find out later that you sat tight and said nothing about all this. Your explanation would then sound extremely thin. If you volunteer it now, there's a likelihood of its being believed. Please, Anthony. Look here, Iris, you're in a tight place. But apart from anything else, there's such a thing as truth. You can't play safe and take care of your own skin when it's a question of justice. Oh, Anthony, must you be so grand? That, said Anthony, was a very shrewd blow. But all the same, we're going to camp. Now. Unwillingly, she came with him out into the hall. Her coat was lying tossed on a chair, and he took it and held it out for her to put on. There was both mutiny and fear in her eyes, but Anthony showed no sign of relenting. He said, I'll pick up a taxi at the end of the square. As they went towards the hall door, the bell was pressed, and they heard it ringing in the basement below. Iris gave an exclamation. I forgot, it's Ruth. She was coming here when she left the office to settle about the funeral arrangements. It's to be the day after tomorrow. I thought we could settle things better while Aunt Lucilla was out. She does confuse things so. Anthony stepped forward and opened the door, forestalling the parlour-maid who came running up the stairs from below. It's all right, Evans, said Iris, and the girl went down again. Ruth was looking tired and rather disheveled. She was carrying a large-sized attaché case. I'm sorry I'm late, but the tube was so terribly crowded tonight, and then I had to wait for 3 buses and not a taxi in sight. It was, thought Anthony, unlike the efficient Ruth to apologize. Another sign that George's death had succeeded in shattering that almost inhuman efficiency. Iris said, I can't come with you now, Anthony. Ruth and I must settle things. Anthony said firmly, I'm afraid this is more important. I'm awfully sorry, Miss Lessing, to drag Iris off like this, but it really is important. Ruth said quickly, That's quite all right, Mr. Brown. I can arrange everything with Mrs. Drake when she comes in. She smiled faintly. I can really manage her quite well, you know. I'm sure you could manage anyone, Miss Lessing, said Anthony admiringly. Perhaps, Iris, if you can tell me any special points. There aren't any. I suggested our arranging this together simply because Aunt Lucilla changes her mind about everything every 2 minutes, and I thought it would be rather hard on you. You've had so much to do, but I really don't care what sort of funeral it is. Aunt Lucilla likes funerals, but I hate them. You've got to bury people, but I hate making a fuss about it. It can't matter to the people themselves. They've got away from it all. The dead don't come back. Ruth did not answer, and Iris repeated with a strange, defiant insistence, The dead don't come back. Come on, said Anthony, and pulled her out through the open door. A cruising taxi was coming slowly along the square. Anthony hailed it and helped Iris in. Tell me, beautiful, he said, after he had directed the driver to go to Scotland Yard. Who exactly do you feel was there in the hall when you found it so necessary to affirm that the dead are dead? Was it George or Rosemary? Nobody at all. I just hate funerals, I tell you. Anthony sighed. Definitely, he said. I must be psychic. 呢節完結啦，咁啊主要就係透露咗阿 Lucy 啦，一個小插曲咧就係佢咧聲稱咧就俾人栽贓喎，有人咧就放咗啲 Cyanide 落佢個手袋度，但係因為咧 Lucy 攞咗呢個 Cyanide 嗰陣時候咧，手攞嗰陣時候咧係經過一個手巾仔嘅，於是乎咧就冇佢嘅指紋，所以警方亦都冇見到。咁問題就嚟啦，咁究竟係邊個將 Cyanide 擺落去 Lucy 嘅手袋度呢？係 Ruth Lessing 啊，定係 Sandra Faraday 呢？定係佢自己呢？咁呢一刻就似乎係將呢個可能性係放到好低㗎啦，就唔會係 Iris 啦。咁 Anthony 呢一刻咧都似乎係警探上身咁喎，因為自從佢表露咗身份之後咧，佢都好似個探員咁啦，趕住咧搭車咧就去向呢個警方透露呢個信息。呢一節咧就冇啲咩特別字，我哋下一節再同大家分享啊，拜拜。